Hello everybody, this is my 5th attempt at this video fest here. And today we are going to be making a tier list. A tier list for TBC PVE. Now, that will encompass all the specs pertaining to the PVE aspects of TBC, and that is heroics, dungeons, and raids. Now, a few disclaimers before I start. This is my tier list, and these are my opinions, so please take them as such. However, if you do have a comment on some of my placements or on some of my input, and you have something you disagree with or agree with, please let me know in the comments and I'll make sure to get back to you. Now, one more thing. I will not be taking into the consideration the damage of the spec as much. This is not a pure damage tier list. This is a global tier list where damage is just one part of the equation. It might be a big part of the equation, but it's still one of the many parts of the equation for each class or each spec. Now, lastly, I would like to go over the tiers so people don't get the wrong idea. If something is in the C tier, I will use C tier as a benchmark for okay. Something in the C tier is quite okay. It is decent and there's nothing more to be said about it. Going down, D tier is bad. F tier is horrible or unplayable, unviable, total garbo. B tier, on the other hand, if C tier is okay, B tier is good. A tier is very good. And S tier is unbalanced, ridiculously good, insane, and amazing. Now that being said, let's dive right in. With the first bad boy being the Boomkin. Now the Boomkin deservedly goes in the A tier. Now I put the Boomkin in the A tier because it has quite decent damage and it provides a very nice utility buff with its 5% spell crit aura to your whole party, which can be quite good, as you can imagine. The Boomkin does damage, provides nice utility, in the A tier it goes. Next up, we have the Feral Bear tank. Now, the Feral Bear tank is an S tier tank. As you will see, I rank all tanks quite highly. However, the Feral is just a touch above the other two because it has great flexibility, being a druid and all. It has the potential to deal with AoE situations really well. It can hold decent single target threat, or actually amazing single target threat, and it has some cooldowns to press when the shit gets tough. So, Druid deservedly in the S tier, in my opinion. Now next, we have the Feral Kitty Cat. Now the Kitty Cat goes into the C tier. The Kitty Cat is quite disappointing in damage, and it has a very intensive playstyle. Now, some people might enjoy that playstyle a lot, and power shifting certainly can be fun, but personally, I tried it and I cannot stay focused on it for the whole duration of the raid, and it really underperforms. It underperforms, in my opinion, and you have to be really spectacular to be a viable competitor for the top of the damage meter. On the other hand, you do bring leader of the pack, so you are not bad. You're just, people will prefer you to be something else. And that something else might be a Restoration Druid. Now the Restoration Druid is good. It's in the B tier. Restoration Druid likes to roll HOTS. It can do some single target healing. Has no raid healing really, apart from the HOTS, but can, do quite well when there's a lot of movement involved. So the Restoration Druid is B tier. Next up, going on the Hunter, we have the Beast Mastery Hunter. Now, Beast Mastery Hunter, as you might think, is S tier. The Beast Mastery Hunter provides a 3% damage bonus to the whole party. And that's not all. Just by being a hunter, it also provides more utility with traps on one side, but also with misdirection. Now, misdirection is a key player in the pulling game. When you pull, you can mark one target and transfer all your threat to that one target. Of course, that being a tank. And you will see misdirection being used on pretty much every pull. Not only does Hunter bring great utility to the table, but it also does insane amounts of DPS, and thus it is in the S tier, undoubtedly. On the other hand, the Marksman Hunter brings a bit less damage and a bit less utility, but it's still a Hunter and it's still really good, so it goes into the good category. On the other hand, the Survival Hunter goes into the A category. Now, the Survival Hunter brings Exposed Weakness, which is quite a strong buff, but also gets some very good late game scaling. I'm talking Black Temple and above, with Lightning Reflexes and Agility stacking. And that might be quite good later on. We will see. Now, moving on to Mage, we have the Arcane Mage. The Arcane Mage is in the B tier. The Arcane Mage is just good, fair damage. It doesn't provide almost any utility. It doesn't bring almost anything to the table. However, it is good damage and it is ranged damage. And as you will see in TBC, ranged classes do fare better in PVE than melee classes. Now, the Fire Mage is in the C tier, as you can see, being that the Fire Mage does slightly less damage than the Arcane Mage and provides the same amount of utility, and with Frost being the bad spec. You're not really viable as Frost, and you might not get invited if you are willing to raid as Frost. Frost spec is just something that is not really accepted in TBC. Next up, we have the Holy Paladin, and it deservedly goes in the A tier. Now, the Holy Paladin has no raid healing whatsoever. However, it has quite some cooldowns for intense moments in the fight, and it can do some really fast, chunky heals through a talent which makes their Holy Light cast as fast as Flash of Light. Plus, the fact it's a paladin with its buffs and auras makes it a really, really strong healer. It is the best tank healer in the game. That's why it sits in the A tier. Protection Paladin sits right next to the Holy Paladin in the A tier. It is the best AoE tank, but it is still very viable single target tank, and it can deal with some pressure phases as well. It is not as strong in that last regard as the Warrior and the Feral, but it holds its own and it gives some nice buffs, being it's a Paladin. Now, being a Paladin and all of that, the Retribution Paladin also brings the same utility. It even brings some nice damage, especially Black Temple and onwards. However, the Retribution brings some much needed utility as a melee DPS. The Retribution Paladin provides a 3% raid crit to everybody, which is insane, and a 2% damage bonus to your party. And that is pretty insane. Altogether, A class. Discipline Priest is okay. Discipline Priest is not really the viable raiding spec, and you might get forced to respec. However, You might even be able to weasel your way into raids just by the virtue of you having two powerful cooldowns, and that is Power Infusion and Pain Suppression. On the other hand, Holy Priest is undoubtedly probably the most flexible healer in the game. If you like healing, and if you like having multiple ways of healing targets, Holy Priest is your pick. It has strong single target heals, weak single target heals, mana conserving heals, AoE heals, party heals, tank heals, all the heals you would want, the Holy Priest has it. And that's it in a nutshell. The Shadow Priest, also A tier. The Shadow Priest, just like the Boomkin, has its damage quite buffed. It is now decent damage, but it also provides Misery, which is a 5% spell damage bonus to everybody, and it provides the much needed Shadow Weaving to the Warlocks. The Assassination Rogue sits with the Mage, with the Frost Mage. The Assassination Rogue is a non-viable option, but you might encounter some people trying it out. It doesn't come anywhere near as close as Combat Rogue. Now, the Combat Rogue is okay, in my opinion. It is nothing special, since it doesn't bring anything to the table and it just leeches off everybody else's buffs. However, it doesn't do that so well, since its damage is quite, mediocre at best. Now, next we have the Elemental Shaman. The Elemental Shaman is undoubtedly an A tier spec. It is among the new players of the house, with the Shadow Priest and the Boomkin. It provides amazing utility and it is quite decent damage. The utility that the Elemental Shaman provides is a 3% crit and 3% hit bonus to every spellcaster in the party, which is insane, really insane. You'll want to have 1 to 2 Elemental Shamans, maybe even 3. Plus, on top of that, the Elemental Shaman provides extra totems. Right next to the Elemental Shaman, we also have the Enhancement Shaman. Now, the Enhancement Shaman provides a 10% attack power bonus to its party and the usual buffs, with its damage being quite relevant. You will often see them jousting for top positions, but they might not get there over Warlocks and Hunters. However, they will still be very relevant. Now, lastly, from the Shaman, we have the Restoration, which I will place with its Restoration brother in the B tier. Restoration Shaman is the best AoE healer. However, it lacks in other departments, especially when the fight requires a lot of movement, since it doesn't have any instant cast heals. Well, it does have Earth Shield, but Earth Shield is not really a heal, it only heals when the target gets hit. So it is quite lacking in that aspect. Keep in mind, B tier still means good. Now, next up, we have the Affliction Warlock. And the Affliction Warlock joins the Restoration Shaman in the B tier. The Affliction Warlock does not do as much damage as the Warlock can. However, the Affliction Warlocks bring some bonus utility. The bonus utility of the Affliction Warlock is that it can have its imp out and provide Blood Pact to the tanks, and also gets a 3% damage bonus on its Curse of Elements. Now, I will explain what Curse of Elements is and why Warlock ranks so high. Curse of Elements gives a 10% damage bonus to all spells. That is just insane. Probably the best debuff in the game. And that's why Destruction Warlock is S tier. It provides one of the best debuffs in the game, and it also does probably the most damage in the game. It is just incredible. Plus, free health cookies. Who doesn't love a Warlock? Now, Demonology Warlock, on the other hand, is a bit of a meme. It sits down here with the bad ones. It is quite bad. I don't think the pet will be viable at all. It might be good for some dungeons and maybe early on in PvP. However, it doesn't scale so good. You have nothing really to do. You don't do great damage. It's just kinda bad. Next up, we have the Fury Warrior, and the Fury Warrior is good. Fury Warrior is good damage. It provides almost no utility apart from Battle Shout to the party. However, it does deal quite a significant chunk of damage. Right next to it would be the Arms Warrior that deals slightly less damage. However, it provides a 4% melee damage bonus to everybody in the raid. And if you're the only Arms Warrior, you will probably have a slot guaranteed. And lastly, we come to the point of the Protection Warrior. Now, the Protection Warrior is, of course, in the A tier. The Protection Warrior's strength is that it can take a lot of punishment, and it has a lot of cooldowns to use when that punishment is going on. Now, the Protection Warrior is probably the worst off in AoE scenarios compared to the other two tanks. However, all three tanks are really good and really decent. And that pretty much concludes this very brief tier list for TBC PVE. Now, I would like to stress again, if you think I misplaced somebody, do let me know in the comments. We can have a fruitful discussion. It is such a lovely day outside, and even lovelier if you would subscribe to my channel and share my video. That really helps a lot. Now, thank you all for watching, and until next time, you have a good one. Stinkfist out.